And welcome to the last session of this conference, which is called Small is Beautiful. And we heard a lot about like what and how we can use decentralized technologies, but we want to focus a bit on why small and what is beautiful. And yeah, I will just shortly present myself, and then we have an intro session around, and then I give a bit an overview on what MES is, and then we have the inputs and the discussion. So my name is Lia Strenger. I was working with MicroEnergy International in the beginning, and now
I'm sorry. Can I just interrupt you for 1 minute, because we have gathered a couple of the helping hands here to say thanks in the beginning of this final session.
Okay. In the beginning, I would have done that in the end, but yeah.
No, it's actually in the beginning, because they might be interested in why small is beautiful, but they might also be interested to getting rid of this big conference. So,
okay.
I see a couple of them here in the participants, and I see some of them also in this group. And on behalf of the organizers, we want to thank you very much. This has been small is beautiful, but this was not small. This was a big conference. This was a big effort, and without your help and long-term planning, flexibility, decentralization. This is swarm intelligence. Almost nobody was in Charlottenburg, and few people are here in Potsdamer Straße, but it still worked. We were N-2 secure because someone put the technology back home. So let me thank and name them. And I would like, if that's possible, you to open your video so that we can see you, and just wave in the order of my list without any prejudice. Ksenia Ritzkowski. Ksenia, are you alive? Ksenia was behind the scene. She put all the banners. She put the conference together, and she was thinking she was fired afterwards. You're not fired. You get tenure. I promise you, you get tenure sooner or later. Ksenia, thank you. Fabienne Banzer was helping hand for Ksenia. Lucas Barna was Mr. IT, and if you stay around and hang around with Jens, you'll get tenure too, but you need to start to work first. Thank you very much, Lucas, for this marvelous job and for keeping things together. Jens was not only a speaker, but also a discussant and the good thinker behind the scenes. Biela Patberg and Henrik Schulz in charge of the IT. Raluca must not be named as an organizer because she's part of the program, but she also did a marvelous job. And I also want to thank our partners at Prague University, at ME Soulshare, and in other places. This has been really unique. And I'll pass the floor to you, Sebastian, to say 1 or 2 more words. Let me just finish with 2 persons that you have not seen at all, but who were instrumental behind the scenes. Björn Steigerwald did a lot of background work, and Petra Hase is our good spirit. Without her, nothing works. And thank you, Petra. You're not there today, but I'll pass this on tomorrow. As a thank you, everybody in the team will get a book. Now, nobody reads books anymore, except at MES. Books are respected. We're producing a book from this conference. And in reality, nobody reads papers. People read strategy papers and people read books. So those of you who have not read the Yunus book, you'll get it, or another book of your choice, so that next year, and we'll announce the site of next year at the end of the session, you'll be even better prepared. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, and I pass on to Sebastian.
Thank you, Christian. Yeah, also on from my side, I think it was an extremely smooth conference, and that was certainly due to the support we had. I mean, we've all been in probably multiple of those kind of conferences over the last 12, 13, 14. I stopped counting the months, how long this situation has been going on. And we all know from that experience that a lot of things can go wrong. And it's not as easy as it looks to create an entire conference online and keep people entertained and make everything work smooth and look professional. So I thank you very much. I think that was really, really spot on. And also thanks to all the speakers to always being on time and, you know, adhering to the Lucas's sign in emails and everything. Is this not, many people are very busy and so it's been really good. So thanks a lot for that. Also on behalf of Prague University, I think our Vice Chancellor, Professor Chang, said it. He's extremely interested in making, according to the vision of Prague University, to make it a proud international university. We want to work closer with TU Berlin. So I think that has been a fantastic occasion to prove that and have that as an initiation. So thanks all. And obviously it was great because a lot of things coincided this week, right? With the anniversary, with the full electrification, with the graduation from the LDC. So a lot of things came together. So it was a really great timing also. So thanks a lot for having Dhaka host this, even though it was virtual.
And also thank you very much to Georg, who's a good spirit behind the Swarm seminar with Raluca. And now over to the one of the spirits of MES, Leah. Thanks.
Okay, I actually read that you wanted to say something and then I forgot it again. Sorry. Yeah, so again, like small is beautiful. So why small and what is beautiful? So my name is Leah Strenge. I was working at MicroEnergy International, and then I'm a PhD student now at TU Berlin in control systems, and I just submitted my thesis. So I'm still a bit on the way, like digging myself up like a mole, these animals that are blind and in tunnels. So I'm just trying to get back into communication mode. Will be a bit easy on me. So yeah, as I said, I want to start with an intro round now before I give an overview on what MES is. So I would like to know from the speakers today, like what is activism for you and what is appropriate technology for you, and is small beautiful, why and how? I mean, yeah, you can try to keep it short. I wanted to start with my version of that, but I can also do it in the end. But yeah, so Ari, maybe you start.
Okay, yes, I can start. Thank you, Leah. Yeah, 3 questions. It's difficult to keep it short because they're very important, and I can talk a lot about activism because it has so many different forms. For me, it's actually to stand up and act up if you see injustice, and to organize with other people and to mobilize other people, yeah, to act together for more justice reality. It also has the component that you think about the strategy and follow the strategy. So you have a certain goal. Yeah. So maybe that's the main definition of activism. And yeah, appropriate technologies is something that I've worked with a lot, and I still do this. So my definition is that an appropriate technology is a user-centered and resource-conscious technology. So it's adapted to the need of the users and the community. So it can be a single person, but also the community. It's a technology that uses locally available resources and that tries to not harm the environment, so that also the future generations or future users can meet their needs with appropriate technologies. I think that's the rationale behind. So you consider, when you're designing or planning appropriate technologies, you consider the resource consumption during the production, use, and end of life of the technology, and you try to minimize the ecological footprint and try to include recycling wherever possible. That's my understanding of appropriate technology. And for your last question, is small beautiful? Why and how? For me, small is beautiful. And because I did a lot of microsystems analysis, that's what I will talk about later also. And I like it because for me, I came to the conclusion that it's easier to grasp, it's easier to understand and to analyze and to evaluate, and also like to overlook, to see also the certain, like the obstacles or the possible problems, if you have a look at the smaller system. And this is why small is beautiful for me, because I can handle it with my head and with my hands. But then you can upscale it and you can connect the many different microsystems together. You can do networking, you can do the swarming. This is small electrification or small like swarm nutrient cycling. And by this, like combine the many different micro perspectives to get a big network of small elements that are beautiful, like a bracelet of pearls or something. Yeah, thanks. That was my 3 inputs or answers to the 3 questions.
Thank you. Christian, what are your answers?
Thank you very much. On the activist side, I think science should be activist. As you know, or you don't know, but you will get to know in the session, my favorite research topic is nuclear power. And I'm sometimes called, even by people at the Institute in DIW, for example, I'm called an activist researcher because I have an opinion. I think nuclear power is dangerous and it's not necessary for the energy transformation, point a la linea. Now, this is called activist by some people. I think it's what we should do. We should have an opinion and then do research, fundamental research, theoretical research, empirical research, to test this hypothesis. And if it turns out that it's wrong, you may correct yourself. This is opposed to the Weberian approach, where the scientist is just a social engineer and gives answers. I believe more in the Schmollerian approach. By the way, he was professor down here for social policy, and he found our association, the Verein für Sozialpolitik, in 1871. Adaptive technology, I think, is a technology that can be sustainable and where consumption and production is somewhat put together. And I'll go more into detail why MES is the counterpart to Bill Gates. Bill Gates is in favor of top-down, large-scale technology like nuclear power, geoengineering, wind, offshore wind parks, etc. MES is the opposite. MES stands for microenergy with a human face, and you need to bear with me. I'm a converted. I used to love offshore wind. Now I think it's not as useful anymore. So we'll get into this in more detail. And small is beautiful is because there are some technologies where you have economies to scale. For example, solar, where it makes sense. In some cases, it does not make sense. And as we see in Texas, for example, Texas would not have been the disaster that we're currently observing if it consisted of bottom-up grids, as we discussed, for example, this morning. I think Michael Toto was from the University of Texas, who said, well, let's do both. Let's do micro and connected, of course, because the more resilient you are, the more secure you are. So I think small is beautiful from that perspective. And I think that applies to a lot of infrastructures that we are currently analyzing and that we want to address in the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And Daniel, what are you saying?
Hey, Leah, good to see you. Thanks for being here. And I mean, those questions are exactly my questions for sure. And I appreciate that. And maybe at least to say that as I'm Daniel Philipp, and my background is energy engineering, and I started to get into this energy field, technology in particular, 20 years ago, or even earlier, like considering my whole study phase as well. 25 years already, I'm into this. And when I decided to get into energy engineering, I have to say that I was quite engaged in subjects that had been, addressing a lot of problems that have not been related to Germany, where I'm from, but basically to all the countries just like Bangladesh. And for me, in those days, it used to be like, wow, far away, and something where I didn't know really what I can do about it. And I learned how much like science can contribute to field activity, and, or let's put it that way, activism somehow for something positive, by getting in touch in those days with microfinancing, to that amazing work of Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, that basically started with learning how economies work, but saying that there needs to be something changed in his country. And he basically said, hey, I can teach it or I can do it. And he became active. And of course, he was not using a particular technology, but if you consider technology as more than like some technical artifact, but something like a structural approach or an understanding, you will find that it's extremely useful, that you can somehow go into the field and change with, for example, microcredits a lot. And what is a microcredit? It's nothing else than a small thing. So by itself, microcredit is already this small, beautiful thing. And I would say that there's nothing better than to say that Grameen started something very small, but with a huge impact, and being really big and finally extremely beautiful. And in the same way, I learned that from the energy perspective, later on, it was also then my chance to put my own activism into like my professional work, and combining my scientific background with really field work, getting to knowing and getting involved in the field of how renewables can, in particular in countries like Bangladesh, have a huge impact and change a lot, while the technology must be very well adapted or well suitable for the daily life of the target group.
Okay, thank you. So then I give my answers, and then I move to like the formal structure bit of MES. So for me, activism is like having this vision that is a driver for like change and innovation, and it's more like a mindset that we always run a changing system, and that we rather have to ask, like, not looking what we have to change, but really be ready to change everything but the things that we want to persist. So it's like a bit of this being mobile in the thinking all the time. And appropriate technology for me is like designed bottom up, and especially regarding infrastructure. And for me, small is also beautiful, because also of the things that have been already said, because it's reliable, it's customized to its environment, and democratic in a sense. So now, who the fuck is MES? So it's more like formally, it's like association at the TU Berlin that is connecting different departments at the TU Berlin and having an international network. But and it was started by Daniel and Noara, and there were 2 graduate schools, I think, consecutive, where Sebastian and Ari Jane, for example, were part of the second round. And right now it's more like a virtual group at TU Berlin, having a weekly seminar. And the characteristics are that it's trans and interdisciplinary. It's so interdisciplinary meaning connecting the different disciplines at the university, and transdisciplinary in a sense like reaching out to business and entrepreneurship and NGOs and policy. And yeah, like all around this 4D mindset, decarbonization, decentralization, democratization, and disruption. I will put the link of the research agenda in the chat. I think I have it here. So like, so the idea is to bring people together that are working on this micro perspective. And for me, it's not only this, it's also like kind of a spirit with which I walk around. And this conference is like a very good example for a typical MES activity of a format. And yeah, that's, I hope gives a bit an idea. So, yeah, so you don't have to be TU Berlin if you want to be MES. So you can just be MES. Now, I think we are coming to the input part. So this phrase, like small is beautiful, is coming from a book from E.F. Schumacher, who's also the founder of Practical Action. And he wrote this book, Small is Beautiful, a study of economics as if people mattered, in the beginning of the 70s. And he was already promoting self-reliant policies for countries in the global south. And he proposed this type of intermediate technology, which then evolved to the term appropriate technology. It was classified as decentralized, labor-intensive, energy-efficient, environmentally sound, and locally autonomous. And when I read this book, like it's long ago, but so I just remember that I really liked how he put this. But this one thing I didn't like so much was like the organization was still a bit centralized. And now I'm wondering if what he would have said if he knew about the power of information and communication technologies and digital solutions. And so that's why I'm very curious to hear what Daniel has to say. And I'm happy to have his perspective on Small is Beautiful today. Yeah. So thank you. And
thanks, Leah. And I honestly, knowing that this book, it seems to be like already kind of anxious, you know, saying that it's just like ancient. I mean, like it's just decades ago when it got written by him, and it's still, you know, seems to be so much up to date, or even more than ever. I have to say it would have been nice. I would have found in my library those days. 77, I was almost born in those days, and or 72, I guess he got it published. 77, he died. I mean, however, small is beautiful. I didn't use that term so far, but if I try to translate it and looking back the 20 years that I started working in that field, I have to say that we decided that what we want to do with understanding the Bangladeshi case of the success for solar home systems, or at least the understanding of why solar home systems seem to be an appropriate technology in that circumstances found in Bangladesh, we just thought of a right name for our research project. And in those days, we decided that the MicroEnergy project would be a nice mix of understanding of research and active involvement. So that's why we called it the MicroEnergy project. And micro by itself stands for nothing else in our understanding in these days than this small part. And the beauty was the fact what we found in Bangladesh, and saying that we need to go really into the south from our perspective, from Berlin, Germany, to learn something that has such a beauty, seeing that technology supposed to be far too expensive for our settings we found in Germany, and have been like economically treated as not viable, not useful, was such a right solution, obviously, in Bangladesh, that for me, this was nothing else than a small is beautiful context that I appreciated a lot. And together with Noir, as you said already, and when we then also started MicroEnergy Systems as like the consecutive element of our MicroEnergy project, the idea was to have this interdisciplinary understanding of why small is beautiful, and why this is also extremely successful, or in other words, why is small powerful? Because if I am now, saying that how could I adopt the idea of Schumacher, I would basically say, in our case, we are discussing this as small is powerful. And small here basically means the micro perspective. And to us, it means like the citizens, keep the people, keep the individuals, their households or their communities in mind, and just figure out what is suitable for their setting. And then this suitable thing should be like as beautiful as it should be for giving them the right, meaning for their life. And I like taking now a little bit aspects of what I've learned during this wonderful conference. I mean, we should get away from the idea of energy access only into what energy access can lead, how energy access could lead to energy well-being, and how this energy well-being, means nothing else than a good life where, for example, information and education access are part of it, where entrepreneurship can be born out of this, where your individual setting can be suited properly by a proper energy supply. Always considering that it is important for us to understand that economically something has only a real value whenever what resources you put in are just resources for your local setting. The more you have centralized structures, and just consider now a nice village in Bangladesh, I love this reference as a metaphor, and there's a lot of coal coming in, or a lot of electricity out of nuclear or out of coal plant, or even oil for being burned locally, kerosene, whatever. I mean, all these resources going into such a world means also that all the money flows out, because the economical, boundaries are just like meaning there's like something coming in and the money flows out, and basically that money flows away. It goes into centralized structures and it has no meaning anymore to those people living in such a village. The more these people are powerful with, for example, having their own solar system, having their own energy production, so that they can use their electricity they just produced on their own solar, on their own rooftop. They're in the position of just making all of their economical activities, their value creation, based on their own production. So basically to keep the value in the village, and we are not discussing that anymore, that there is an economical development that needs to be like induced. No, we basically give the chance that the economic development remains where it belongs to. So that is the small part. It's just like this community, this village, where these individuals, the household, they keep going with that, with their own productivity, with their own value. Nobody takes it away from there, at least not in these huge centralized structures. So small is powerful. And this powerful means, of course, just in cases we found it in Bangladesh, and I guess it's a well seen and well proven context, it helped the people, that they have a decentralized structure that they can use for their own purpose. They are becoming more resilient. Christian, you made the point. I mean, maybe in other contexts, we have now seen how big, how little the resilience is, just in case we have too much centralization. The decarbonization going on with solar is another great effect for those local communities, because it helps them to also have an economical an environment and biological environment that gives them still the chance to create their values. And that also means it empowers them in being independent, more independent also from centralized structures, and also gives them a new right, a new maybe even vote, in democratizing push. If you consider what happened in particular in Bangladesh, where people feel much more, now they have more rights because they have access to all this, whether these are solar home systems or microcredits all these small but extremely relevant elements of daily life. And it brings me a little bit back to what I've said in earlier the presentations that I gave on the subject of the universal basic energy service. As I've learned during this conference, we should consider this as services. I mean, everybody should have the right that at least the basic needs considered energy or electricity should be somehow covered in just such a local way that it's not being possibly taken away from you, so that you have the chance and the right to stay with that and, you know, maintain your own life. And that gives you a lot of, you know, power to also create value for yourself and value for your community, value for your family, value for your setting that you live in. And that is something that, at least I would say, that the last 20 years have really shown that this can have so much of change to the whole world even. And I mean, with the point of also providing to such approaches that I would call also smaller are beautiful approaches, just the one with microcredits and being like, and then also like worldwide seen through Yunus and the Nobel Peace Prize. It shows that we have a great chance and a great window of opportunity out there, that all the smaller beautiful approaches should be used, should be like pushed forward to step in such a direction where, you know, we see that more and more people are getting the right awareness why small is powerful. So I hope that out of this, we also gain a lot of good ideas. What could be next research points? What could be next research aspects that we should consider, not only in Bangladesh, in many other countries, maybe also in your neighborhood, wherever you are. I found a lot of these ideas in my kids. So maybe there it's also an interesting point to see what microenergy systems look like in my kids and how we can push this. So I guess we should gather a lot of good ideas, and I would love to see that those who are currently here with us in this session, maybe put on your ideas in the Q&A section already that you have. What should we just look at from the perspective of how small is powerful? Thanks.
Thank you. Any comments or questions right now? Okay, I would have just one question directly to that, just because I was still thinking in this Schumacher definition of labor intensive and this digitalization part where everything is automated. And maybe this is a research question, I'm just not getting this together in one strategy or whatever thinking. Is there like a paradigm clash that these digital solutions actually try to make gas work less or having to work less, but this like these intermediate technologies were more try to design that people are happy because they also have to do things with this technology? Yeah, so
I guess, Leah, you're striving the right questions, and of course, I mean, I wouldn't now sit here in this round if I have the answer already. So I would love to see something like this becoming also part of the focus, and also figuring out how far things that Schumacher basically put in his hypothesis already, how this is like still an issue today, or how that has also changed. And of course, you're right. I mean, the idea of, you know, how could, for example, the question look at if Schumacher still lives, you know, what would he would say about the current situation? How would he then basically maybe change his point of view or adapt it to the current situation? I would love to see that as an interesting question to be seen on the research agenda.
okay, then I think we move on. Christian, I recently heard that there is small and clean and cheap nuclear available soon. So I think Bill Gates does something about it, like nuclear home systems. Can you advertise?
Yeah, we just heard this morning from Dan Kamen the idea of tendering local networks And actually, if you go back in the 1940s, nuclear power was considered to be the driver of economic development. If you look at the founding charter of the International Atomic Energy Association, and also Euratom in 1957, it says nuclear brings economic development. And we're rehearing this from Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Frank Thelen and all these startup gods that most of us have certain appreciation for. Together with Ben and Björn, I prepared a couple of slides that I want to share with you, and I'm giving this speech for Ben, who unfortunately cannot be here today. And as you know, we are always considered, if there are parties, we're always apart because we work on nuclear energy. This was not attractive. We are probably the only, with Claudia, the only energy economist in Germany taking this serious, and Hans-Werner Sinn. And so we're trying once to get closer to you and to other economists. And on the other hand, we're trying to understand what this myth is about these SMRs. And Ben should be here, and in giving this, he'll do a great junior research group, and we'll find topics beyond nuclear energy. My interest is the value of plutonium in this. You may know that the Mars rover is driven by 6 kilograms of plutonium. So that would give a positive benefit to plutonium. We are commemorating 10 years of Fukushima next Thursday, and 35 years of Chernobyl on 26th of April, etc. So plutonium may also have a negative value, right? This is a true question that economists should think about. And so let me just go through this rapidly to kind of add to our research agenda, right? So the history is that, or what the current thing you refer to is Bill Gates, how to avoid the Texas disaster. And I thought, I didn't have the time, but next year probably we'll have a scenario on how to avoid the Texas disaster with decentral electrification, because there are solutions we have, but there are breakthroughs we need, and in particular the interconnection between the DC and the AC. By the way, you know, we wrote a paper with Sebastian and Pio Barke on this. Sebastian Schwinn is really a job market topic for those of you who are interested in job markets. Don't worry, don't be afraid. Hang on, you'll get there. Don't worry. But you have to go through the smallest beautiful discussion, because that is important. Now, in the literature, there are two paths that are kind of idealized. One is the soft path. Don't remember that Emery Lovins from the Rocky Mountain Institute was given the Bundesverdienstkreuz for having invented the Energiewende a couple of years ago. And then on the other hand, you have the 1960s, Richard Nixon, his advisor, Alan Weinberg, who invented the molten salt reactor in the 40s and 50s. And you find this discrepancy today in Bill Gates and his cloud, amongst them David Keith, a Harvard professor of public policy, Václav Smil, a notorious economist. On the other hand, you have us, MicroEnergy, you have collectives for angepasste Technologie, for example, Kante, that Ari was part of, and Katharina. And you got literature on diversity in our swarm, so to speak, for example, Isa and Chris Hauenstein, who are working on the appreciation of technology from different perspectives, right? So I will spare you. We'll have a seminar in our internal seminar next Wednesday, I think, on fusioning the triple or the quadruple embeddedness framework with what we do if we attack an industry and don't have immediate answers. That is a system good analysis. Let me just mention that also with respect to the small is beautiful. We need to go through this analysis. We need to analyze the technical system, alternatives in relation with demand. We need to know the actors and the roles that they play, and we need to think about financing. We need to think about production. We need to think about economies of scale, economies of scope, and all that sort. And this is tricky. This is not trivial. Let me show you the first SMR, so to speak. Let's do a test here. Who of you has ever heard of the term SMR? What does that stand for? Salma, are you there? Oh, she probably can't speak. Hi, Salma. Good to see you in the audience. SMR stands for small and medium reactors. It was converted by Nobel Prize winner and energy minister Chu from MIT in 2010. And so he switched from the medium to modular to make it more attractive. And since then, some people refer to this as small and modular reactors. They are neither small nor are they modular, as I will show in a second if I get the screen sharing redone here. And actually, the first reactor with small capacity was the Nautilus. Nautilus is a book by Jules Verne. And there was a name given by Admiral Rickover to the first US nuclear submarine in 1955. It works, diesel works, nuclear works. It's a light water cooled reactor, and it works. So it's nothing new. If Bill Gates says that NuScale is something new, this is wrong. We have had nuclear power with small capacities for 75 years. This is a new scale, and the modular part comes because you can put different modules together and then add flexibility. You can also supposedly produce this more economically. This is at least the proposition. Now, in order to understand this debate, and I will not go into detail, we once again need to look at the past. I told you about the Nautilus, and the modern Nautilus is called NuScale. It's called NU scale. But there are other technologies, and here comes the term clean, which I don't understand what is clean in nuclear energy, because nuclear energy is the most dirty technology you can have, because you got nuclear waste that doesn't have any long-term storage for the time being. Professor Mansour on Tuesday said he doesn't know where to put the waste that comes from the Russian reactor that Bangladesh is just in the process of buying. And there is research on this. Some of you may remember the fast neutron, fast breeder in Kalkar. Peach Bottom was a high temperature reactor, and you got the Alvin Weinberg molten salt reactors from the late 40s, which fueled an airplane at the time, right? So it may work, but it doesn't. So until today, you have so-called SMRs, for example, the fast neutron reactor in China, the high temperature pebble bed reactor in South Africa, based, by the way, on a German innovation, the Jülich AVR, and the molten salt reactor. In addition, waste burning, so in parentheses, and here comes an issue that I will not go into detail, but which is important, is what you're going to do with the waste. Now, this is complicated. If you want to stay in the discussion, you need to know this. Ben Björn and myself, we put this into a game, did gamification. So whoever of you wants to play cards with us, we have a full deck of cards of SMRs. And whoever's birthday is being celebrated, tell me if you're interested. We bought them on public money, by the way. And we have 32 of these reactors in a little nice game here. And you can play quartet with SMRs. It's fun and it educates you, because you need to have this knowledge if you want to participate in the debate. Now I come to an end, and I tell you in a second. Sorry, I need to re-share, because I now come to the economic part, which is called economies of scope, economies of mass production, economies of scale, and how does that work? First of all, nuclear power cannot be small. Think of the production of uranium or thorium in Africa, in Kazakhstan, etc. You need to convert it, you need to enrich it, you need to produce the fuel. This is not small. You have nuclear power plants, you need to decommission, and you need a place to store the waste, right? This is not small, and it cannot be small, by the way. You also can produce nuclear weapons from either side, either before or after the treatment, right? Nuclear power has never and will not be competitive, because contrary to Wright's law, Wright was the producer of airplanes. He said, well, if I double production, my average cost declined by X%, let's call it 10%, 15%, etc. This does not hold for nuclear power. Nuclear power has become ever more expensive. And this is because the security issues, the uncertainties, the risks have not been assessed appropriately in the 1950s. So Wright's law does not hold. Now, what you're doing now is that you have reactors with high capacity, let's say 900 megawatts. You even have nowadays the EPR in France and in Finland has 1600, and you're making them smaller, so you forego economies of scale here for economies of mass production, which can be characterized by production functions called the learning factor. I'll spare you the details. We're in the process of writing a paper on that. So you need to catch up, right? You're losing size, so you need to catch up through mass. And if you do the calculations, there's a nice textbook that has just come out. You'll find that you need about 5,000 to 10,000 nuclear power plants. I repeat, 5,000 to 10,000 nuclear power plants to get to this point, right? So who wants to build 10,000 nuclear power plants to electrify the global south? I don't understand. I understand that entrepreneurs and startups in that field are burning public money. That I understand. I understand the fascination. My father is a theoretical chemist. He was fascinated by nuclear power, but economically wise and security wise, it is a bad idea, and we should not pursue it. The only SMR that has worked is and was military. It's the Nautilus. It works, but it doesn't have anything to do with small is beautiful or with sustainable development in the global south or the global north. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there any direct comments or questions? Then I would have one, we already heard that throughout the conference that in Germany we have the nuclear phase out next year. And could you elaborate on the role of social movements in this whole energy transformation context? Like what, yeah.
First of all, let me with all due respect, tell you that you and everybody knows that nuclear cannot be phased out. Once you hit a neutron, you start splitting neutrons with fast or thermal neutrons. This continues for 1 million years, and you can't get out of it like you get out of a bus, or you can get out of coal exit, but you can't get out of nuclear. So what we're in the transformation, we call it Atomumstieg, because we're starting to look for decommissioning, and we need safe storage, deep geological storage. And I think the fascination for the activism is interesting. I've studied that myself, but the original issue is a technical issue. The origin of the anti-nuclear movement is technical, because experts, self-named experts, said this is safe. It's like Japanese Prime Minister Abe said, don't worry, come to Japan, Fukushima is safe. Nuclear power is not safe and cannot be safe because it's complicated. If it was safe, and this is a very simple economic reasoning, there would be a market for insuring against risks. Since the 50s, there is no market. You can't insure against nuclear accidents, and we're commemorating one next Thursday. So it cannot be safe, and since it cannot be safe, you should not pursue it. It's welfare destructing. And the movement then turned into a larger movement. And by the way, not only in Germany, the first movement was in the States, second was in France, and then in the 60s it came to Germany. But the origin is a technical economic issue. And for those of you who are interested, I recommend the reading of Radkau, who wrote his habilitation on this, and who explains that we should not put this into a political corner. We should treat the origin, and the origin is one of insurance and of security.
Okay, thanks. Then we can discuss this more after the last input. So Ariane, what is your micro perspective on microsystems research? You already said a bit in the beginning. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Also prepared some slides and start them now. Yeah. Okay, do you see the full screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I decided to share some insights from my personal journey through the microsystems research, and also at the end introduce the new research field which we want to study collectively as a sister research topic to the microenergy system. So my main field of research and my research interest is sustainable resource management along the triple nexus of sanitation, energy, and agriculture. Because these are three fields that are connected with the basic needs. So we need food, we need toilet, and we need to prepare our food, and we need to have warm rooms in winter. And all this also consumes resources. And so I'm interested in resource management along this triple nexus, and how we can establish circular economies with specifically the element of nutrient cycling within this nexus. By using and promoting effective and efficient adapted technologies. So we had several definitions of this adapted technologies at the beginning. And of course, they also need to be affordable to the people that want to use it. And one specific focus was also that connects these three systems is how can we use residues from sanitation and energy to manage the soil fertility? Because toilets and cooking facilities are everywhere, or should be everywhere where people are, and they produce residues. So these are locally available resources. Sometimes they have not been used before for the nutrient cycling, and how can we make them usable in order to manage the soil fertility as the basis for agriculture and long-term food production. So this was and is my field of research and my personal interest of research. I've done this in 2 parts. So the first part is here. Step 1 was when I was part of the research group MicroEnergy Systems. You can see Sebastian here on top in the center of the picture. We were 8 PhD students with different disciplinary backgrounds. I come from the field of industrial engineering, so I studied energy engineering and economics. And I did my PhD from 2012 to 2018 with the title Valuing Wastes, because I wanted to consider waste as a resource for soil fertility management. And in my PhD, I worked with smallholder farming community in Karagwe in the northwest of Tanzania. So this is part 1. Again, we have this triple nexus, and I focused on the field of sanitation. I was working with different technologies, and in the first step just had a look on how these technologies can be used to fulfill the need for sanitation service or energy provision. But here energy is not electricity, but cooking energy. And what are the resource consumption, what are the emissions, but also what is the potential residues that are produced that can later be used for agriculture. So I was working within sanitation with ecological sanitation, so toilets that are created in order to make recycling of nutrients possible, and specifically with the so-called urine diverting dry toilets. So you collect, urine and feces separately, and then you can use the 2 material flows to produce fertilizers. And for the part of energy, I was working with a biogas digester and the microgasifier cooking stoves. Both also produce a material as a byproduct, namely biogas digestate or biochar, like powdery charcoal, or like a powdery char or char powder that can also be added to the compost and thus to the soil. That's just to give you quick insight on the technologies that I've worked with in Tanzania. And then all these technologies can be linked together, or the 3 systems can be linked to create these material cycles that are part of a circular economy, and specifically through the recycling of nutrients. So we produce food in agriculture. We can use the technologies for cooking. Then we eat the food, we digest the nutrients, we go to the toilet, we can collect the resources, urine and feces, to produce the fertilizers. We need to make sure on our way that we eliminate pathogens so that it's a safe approach of nutrient cycling. Also here, safety is very important for us. And then we have fertilizers that we can bring back to the fields. So we have a local system of nutrient cycling. So that was my interest, researching the link between these 3 systems. That's just showing again. So in microenergy systems, we usually focused on the energy system, and here I also included the sanitation system, or the microsanitation system, and the agroecosystem. And these 3 microsystems are then connected through material flows and through the cycling of material as a part of a circular economy. Doing this research and also observing how we can decrease the climate impact, how we can improve sustainable use of resources, and also how we can improve, or that these fertilizers are really potential fertilizers that can even increase plant production and food production, was motivating me a lot to continue to work in this topic. And ultimately, the aim of microenergy, as I understood it, was also to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. First of all, to Sustainable Development Goal number 7, affordable and clean energy. But with this nexus of energy and sanitation, we also want to contribute to the SDG number 6, clean water and sanitation. Food production, of course, aims at the SDG number 2, zero hunger. And then all of them are also connected to responsible consumption and production. And we could pick out some more of the SDGs. And they are very important goals of the global society. And what is also important, they are targeting the communities in the global south, but also in the global north, because also we have to create or design our lifestyle more sustainable. Because if we have a look at the reality, we have sustainable goals, but we live in an unsustainable world. Many of you might know this graph. It's the graph showing the planetary boundaries. So here you have nine different spheres of ecological boundaries, like dimensions that are more or less stressed by modern human or modern societies. But through the resource, mainly through resource consumption. And of course, we can stress the Earth a bit, and the Earth may recover, or the ecosystems may recover. But if we stress them to a certain extent, there's a higher risk that the Earth cannot recover, and that we ultimately risk that we destroy the ecosystem, so that life on Earth is in danger, so to say. You can see here on top, climate change, an issue where we talked a lot about, is already in the zone, in the yellow zone, of an increasing risks that the climate may change, reach a tipping point where we then also risk life on Earth. But even more severe is one topic that is also in the media already. It's the biodiversity, biosphere integrity. But another topic that is not so much talked about is here on the top bottom left side, the biogeochemical flows of phosphorus and nitrogen. And they are related to predominantly linear economies of nutrients within food production and the sanitation sector. So I'll show you what I mean. In the most industrial agriculture in the global north, which produces about 50% of the food worldwide, we produce so-called synthetic fertilizers. So there's a process, Haber-Bosch, where we use nitrogen from the air, produce synthetic fertilizers, apply it to the field. And during application, we create climate gases. And end of life, these nutrients, because they're often overdosed, they end up in the hydrosphere, causing something called eutrophication, which risks life in the aquatic systems. And then we have also phosphate mining. This is not a lignite coal mine, but a phosphate coal mine. It looks the same. So we use a finite resource, dig it as the rocks, take it as rocks out of these mines, and produce the fertilizer that is then applied on the field with huge tractors, and also ends up at the end in the hydrosphere. But all this is like a nutrient shift. So nutrients are transported from either the atmosphere or these mining areas through the agricultural sector into the atmosphere through climate gases, or the hydrosphere through nutrient leaching. So there's no cycling of nutrients. So you can see here, these fields come along with environmental damage, of course. I explained the nutrient shifting. Also, it's a finite resource, so we're going to reach peak phosphorus at a certain point. There are debates about if it's earlier or later, but we're going to reach it. And the closer we get to peak phosphorus, the deeper we have to dig for phosphate, rock phosphate. And then these rock phosphate is often contaminated with radioactive substances or heavy metals such as cadmium or uranium. So we have a pollution of the fertilizers, and then there's already evidence that these pollutants also end up in food and are consumed by human beings. problem of the nitrogen fertilizer, I explained the nutrient shifting, but also the energy consumption. It's estimated that about 2 or 3% of the global energy consumption is only used to produce nitrogen fertilizers. So to get the nitrogen from the air, you need a lot of energy to extract it. Also, then these fertilizers are not available to everybody. So they're mainly used in the industrial agriculture, but not available for small scale farmers. And if they would be available, they're often not affordable. Yeah. This picture just shows, you don't need to understand it in detail, the different colors indicate different nutrient fertilizers, but it shows the global trade of fertilizers. And behind each of these arrows is, of course, climate gas emissions for the transportation via ships and cargo ships, and also nutrient shifts. So for example, most of the phosphate fertilizers in red is coming from the African continent, brought to Asia, North America, but also Europe. So we have a huge shift of a resource like phosphate from one continent to the other continent, but usually the waste products at the end, they are not brought back. So we have a one-way system of nutrient flows, which cannot be sustainable in the long term, because there will be a lack of nutrients on the one continent, and there will be a overdoses of nutrients on the other continents, which we already have in Europe if we have a look at the high nitrate concentration in our groundwater bodies. So this problem of linear nutrient economies gets even jeopardized by the meat production. So this picture that I showed before with the huge tractors is actually on a field in Brazil, where they produce soybeans. And most of the soybeans that are produced in Brazil are then exported either to Europe and Germany or to North America, to the US, to feed animals, to produce meat. And the meat production is then again associated with climate gas emissions and with eutrophication, because in some countries we produce so much meat that we don't know where to put all the shit and the urine that the animals produce. And in the feces or fecal matter of the animals they contain the nutrients that have been added to the soil while the fodder, like the soybeans, has been produced. So here the shift of fertilizers to produce the fodder, and then we may have the same big arrows for the transportation of fodder material. But then at the end, the excreta is not transported back. So we have an open loop or linear system with severe risks for our ecological integrity of our planet, as I showed before with the planetary boundaries. So this was motivating me to think, to change, or to try to work as a researcher for a change and to establish circular economies with the focus on nutrient cycling also in the global north. So we take bio-waste from any human settlement. It can be a village, it can be a big city, it can be an urban area. We take the bio-waste, including human urine and feces. We treat it in order to remove pollutants. Pollutants can be or are mostly in modern societies pharmaceutical residues and hormones. So we want to remove these pollutants and also the pathogens like the diseases, germs for diseases. So we need to remove them. And we have technologies that can do this. And then we can safely recycle the nutrients and carbon. Carbon is important for the humus reproduction in the soil. That is an essential element of soil fertility and then thus of long-term food production. We can produce food and bring back these food products to the human settlements. And by this, we can create a circle that enables sustainable and future-proof food production. So that's what I'm working now at the moment at the Leibniz Institute of Vegetable and Ornamental Crops in Großbeeren, just a bit south of Berlin. So we ask, our research question is how to improve the sustainability in horticultural production most effectively and efficiently through nutrient cycling. So again, I'm working on the same nexus. I want to combine the use of residues from sanitation and energy to produce fertilizers for sustainable agriculture. So these are the cycling systems that I work with. Most interesting for me are the two on the left side. So we have the toilet. We can produce liquid fertilizers from urine, and we can produce compost as a humus or organic fertilizer from the fecal matter, like the solid part of the fecal matter mixed with other waste products through composting and a specific heat treatment in order to have a hygienically safe product. Yeah, so this is also the idea of what we want to work with in the future, and we are forming a new collective to work on this, on the microcycle systems for the nutrient transition. So in parallel to Energiewende, we work now with the term Nährstoffwende, because we need a new way on how we work with our nutrients, and we need to include nutrient cycling as an essential element in modern circular economies. So these are the two cycles that we want to specifically focus on, but of course we are also open for the other cycles that are more connected with the energy system. We want to test them in different production systems. We want to have a look at the benefits along the whole value chain of the circular economy, but also at the potential burdens. So for example, we also assess greenhouse gas emissions at different points at the production or value chain. We also need to have a certain look that, like, to make sure that this elimination of pollutants is really happening. So we apply multiple methods like experiments, work analytically, collect data, do modeling, and try to see that everything fits together along this value chain. We also need to develop models for logistics and how to organize all the different stakeholders that are required for this. And we have to overcome a lot of legal obstacles. So Christian was just telling you about the nuclear power reactors. And often I ask myself, I think it's easier to build a nuclear reactor in Germany than building a fertilizer plant to produce fertilizers from human urine or human feces, because people are really so much afraid of using this resource, but forgetting that we know we have the technological knowledge to have very easy, and compared to a nuclear power plant, it's low tech what we apply, but we can produce a safe product to be used in a sustainable food production based on circular economies. But it's very difficult to convince politicians and different stakeholders on the legal level, so to change the legal framework that this will be possible. I think it's easier really to build a nuclear power plant in Germany than a fertilizer plant. But we are working for this, and we will and need to be many, need to work collectively on this. So let's see what will happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Then of course we also need to, what is helping is the demand for these kind of fertilizers and the affordability of these fertilizers. But this is, that's also what we are studying together with other institutes like TU Berlin or the University for Sustainable Development in Eberswalde. And hopefully we will be lucky to receive some funding from the German Ministry for Education and Research in order to set up a demonstration project in Eberswalde, just north of Berlin, where we want to demonstrate in a Reallabor that it is actually possible to recycle nutrients contained in human excreta, and to communicate about our results of the multidisciplinary assessment that we plan, and also to involve politicians and or initiate and start a wide dialogue and discussion about the use of human excreta. And we also want to set up the microcycle systems research as a research group where bachelor students, master students, or PhD students can join us and pick like a specific micro research question from this very interesting field in order to write your final thesis. and also to communicate it. So it's also about finding new ways of research communication in order to push the nutrient transition forward. So this is my vision for the further development of microsystems research. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ari. Is there any direct comment or questions?
I would have one.
Okay.
Because we are a collective, and in a collective you need to be honest with each other. And Leah was referring to this issue of technology and IT, and I also think we need answers whether we need research in space technology, because there are things like the digital watch that come from space research. Personally, I think it's interesting, but I've never seen anything that, except for Teflon fun, I've never seen anything that comes useful from that. So this is essentially.
Aren't solar panels coming from this?
But we actually also have this connection, because one technology that we work with that
Exactly.
is producing urine fertilizer is developed for the.
That is not small. That is not small. That's large, and that uses plutonium to run the Mars rover. And
the module itself for the urine production, not.
I'm proposing that we put this on the agenda, because it intervenes with the question of incentives and the drivers of technology and innovation. And there are some economists in the audience, and they are looking for research topics. And this is an uncharted ground. You may think, oh, there has been since Malthus, people are thinking about technical progress. No, nobody has the slightest clue in micro models. In macro models, it's easier. You just define an autonomous technical change, and then here you have it. In micro, you don't have the slightest clue how Ariane and her colleagues are pushing through the spec to get this product on the German market. So I think it's an important topic, and it probably links us to the issue of technical progress, innovation, and small is beautiful, because it's not as trivial as it sounds. Thanks.
Yeah, and my question was already answered. Actually, I had just the question how important this collective vision is, and what the main problems are arising from this, the bigger the better lover things, which is predominant in Germany, probably in that regard of the sanitation, energy, and agriculture nexus, because I think each sector is like doing its own things. I mean, I know it from the energy sector that like heat and electricity won't talk to each other. I mean, they are starting now, and or even gas and electricity and so on. So like the sector coupling, and how do you see this thing in like Germany? Is there like are they talking to each other, like these sectors?
Yeah, it's challenging, because we also experience, since we have to have this political debate, that they're just sending us, they always say, oh, we are not responsible, you need to go to the other ministry. We are not responsible, you know. So we are just sending back and forth between the Environmental Institute and the Agricultural Ministry. So this will be the next step to really, thinking quite positive that we will manage, but to get them on one table and really get the discussion together, because they need to work together, and we need to somehow interlink it, because like agriculture is so much related to environment. I think from an organizational level, it makes sense that we have two ministries, but for this specific topic, we need to couple it and discuss it together. And the next part will be, or what is part of the Nährstoffwende, that you have a connection between the wastewater treatment, waste management, and the food production. Because until now, you also have like wastewater treatment and waste treatment. They are somehow connected, but also two separate sectors. And yeah, we need to connect them together, and also with the agricultural sector.
I think that could be a probably you want to open for other questions, but in this conference we had sector coupling, right? We had the coupling between, of course, heating and electricity, and also transportation. And so this is a topic that is also important at the micro energy level, and that needs to be deepened. Probably other questions. I would have two really good additional ideas for research, but let's open up to the audience, because we still have 10 to 15 minutes.
So I don't see any questions. Yeah, I'm still like what I find still difficult in this discussion, like to also like bring in this collective vision. I mean, for this, these pilot projects are so important, but on the other hand, they are so hard to achieve because the regulation is just so focusing on these large infrastructure and so on. And I feel that there is like this one thing is hindering the other, and then this will also not change. So for me, there is a huge like kind of how do you say, break in the process, which I don't know how we can really overcome this other than like by just staying motivated. Because things, I mean, I also have a good example, because for example, in 2012 we were having like I was, and I think Ariane too, we were participating in this cooperative that wanted to buy the German Berlin power grid. And we be like all students, nobody had actually money, but people were just buying these cooperative like portions, or I don't know, the shares, let's say. And because we really believed that would be a great thing. And now, like, but it's owned by Vattenfall, like a Swedish company that also has nuclear power plants, and it's like all the value proposition is going out. And then now, I think 9 years later, Vattenfall said, no, we don't want this anymore. And now I think Berlin can buy back this power grid, and they are actually also letting the cooperative like being part of this buying process. So part of this, it's not clear how it will be managed in the end, but I already almost forgot about it. And then I heard this message. I was super happy. Like, it was like, oh my God, like these things can really happen. It's just such a long process, and we really have to stay motivated. Yeah, so that's why actually also we need this type of collectives and microenergy systems, just to also hear some of these positive stories, right? I mean, I have another one, I don't know if it's positive, but yeah, you want to say something?
It is, and patience. I think that's also one thing of activism, that maybe you're fighting today, but the effort will be for the next generation. So it's sometimes like planting trees. If you're planting trees here, it will be your kids or your grandkids that will eat the fruits. And that can be sometimes the same for activism. So it also takes some time. That's also why I had this, like, for me, activism also contains that you have a strategy or clear goal that needs to be defined by the collective. It can be adjusted on the way, but to find there, and then, yeah, but you don't have the guarantee that you will be part of reaching this goal. That's sometimes really hard.
yeah, that's why you need this vision, like how it can become. And yeah, I have this other thing that my mother, she's like a journalist and was always doing features about renewable energies in the radio. And they were already laughing at her, like, because it was the time in the 90s where like this whole financial market came up. People were like, oh, I gain my money by sitting around on the stock market and so on. And they were laughing at her, like, what is she doing with this solar energy? And and now it's like people are not laughing at least anymore. So there's like this process. And but I still find it hard always to adapt to those to these people who are like kind of questioning out of this fear that we don't have to change anything, although it's so obvious that we have to. So I think this is this main thing that you have to keep alive and not just get this resignation coming.
There's a question in the chat.
I just want, should I answer written?
Yeah, go ahead.
Or
no, just say something.
Okay, probably. So there was a question if alternative agricultural systems, so systems with no monocultures, pesticides, etc., conflicts with sustainably providing enough nutrition for a growing world population. I don't think so. I'm convinced that we need these alternative agricultural systems. I think Christian had this example of someone was just saying it's safe and then everybody believed. And I think we have the same myth in the food production that people say it's never possible to feed the world with organic farming. But there are, and this saying is just kept as reality, even though there are publications and there are evidence also, especially from the smallholder community, that you can reach even higher yields with alternative and ecological farming practices. So it's, in the moment not true, and also in the future not true, because the intensive agriculture always needs more input of resources. You always need to add more fertilizers to the soil and more water to the soil because you're destroying the soil fertility. So it won't work in an endless row. And the growing world population means that we have to think about 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 200 years in the future where we need to feed the people. And if we continue like this, there will be a point where it breaks together, and also industrial agriculture cannot feed the world because then the demand for resource input will just be too high. So I think not alternative or industrial agriculture conflicts with sustainably providing enough nutrition for a growing world. But of course, we need to be aware of this nutrient cycling. So we need to try to bring back as much as nutrients as possible to the soil from the waste materials that we have, and don't waste our waste, but use it or consider it as a resource. I think this is very, very essential. And then, we can provide enough food, and this is also scientific consensus of like really well-known and reputed scientists. It's a matter of our diet. We need to stop eating so much meat or meat at all. So this is the efficiency of the food production system is another big screw which we can turn. And the diet matters a lot if we can provide enough food for the growing world population. So this is scientific consensus. We need to set up circular economies if we want to feed the world, and we need to be more resource efficient, and we need to change our diet. And I can add some links in the chat with the specific publications that are saying this.
Thank you. There's one more question. Do you want to answer it quickly because we're running out of time, and then I would wrap up maybe.
Yeah, how they can contribute. I mean, food sovereignty includes that you have access to the basic needs you need for food production. And of course, micronutrient systems can, for example, not solve the problem of land grabbing. So we need to make sure that farmers have access to the land where they live, and that it's not people from the global north or industries that are claiming and buying the land. So this needs to be, this is another fight that is very important. But micronutrient systems can empower farmers to produce their own fertilizers and be independent from the fertilizer industry. And I think this is one contribution to food sovereignty. But of course, there are other elements, and it's a set of system change that is needed. That's the short answer.
Okay, thank you. Then I think there's no more questions. Is there any final remarks? Otherwise, I wrap up because also my attention span is expiring. I have taken away small is powerful, nuclear is dirty, nutrient cycling is the new sun, or the new thing to do, and always run a changing system. That was my initial idea. That's all from me. I think I have to hand over to Christian because he wants to announce the next year's conference.
Well, first of all, Leah, thank you very much for preparing this and being back. If I may just add, there's a material incentive in our activities, because what you are doing, and I'm a visitor, I appreciate that you have invited me, but you are all very successful postdocs. Leah has just got a postdoc position in electric systems. Ariane got a postdoc position. Sebastian Straten and Sebastian Gros even became a businessman and an academic. So whoever is in the audience, take this serious. These ideas are innovative, and they're relatively easy to publish and to make academic careers with that, which is a nice complement to the activist side. Okay, this was a super intensive and comprehensive conference. Think of where we started on Tuesday morning or 2 p.m. Dhaka time, 50 years. Think back of the creation of Bangladesh in 1971. Think of the somewhat controversial debate about sustained growth, green growth. I think nobody mentioned degrowth in the debate, but many of us had this in mind. We talked about technical issues, socio-technical challenges to network interconnection. Dan Kamen this morning said, and he's a physicist and he loves hard science. He said we need less hard science and more social science. We had yesterday a real in-depth discussion about the SDGs. Let me just, before announcing next year's site, let me tell you that I think, this is not very original, but I think what brings us together are the SDGs. And one idea for joint research would be to develop the SDGs of the 2030s, because the SDGs are running out. In the next 9 years, they will be finished. And few people have the capacity to work on different SDGs, right? Ariane on 6, we have 7, 13, of course, 11. To nuclear power, by the way, 16 peace and organizations. So that I think that's something that brings us together towards another research stream. But having said that, it's my pleasure to announce that the 2022 MES conference will take place with partners in East Africa. East Africa, important for, of course, the SDG 7. Many of you have partners there, academic partners, business partners, project partners. And this comprises, of course, Tanzania, Rwanda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and others. And I think this year's conference has brought together many institutions, business perspectives, startups, etc., academic organizations, and I think we should try to bring most of them over to East Africa, where we'll have the 2022 MES conference in the spring of next year, hopefully on site. Hopefully, if not, we'll do it in a bi-partisan manner. We'll have digital and a local conference as we did this year, and I hope you will all be able to join us. Let's work towards that direction as collectively as we can. And once again, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks for having a broad, intensive debate, and see you next year in East Africa.